because it wasn't on.
It hasn't been announced yet.
It's still not.
That hour. All right, well, I think let's get started. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. My name is Julie, I'm the events manager here at Roundabout. So we just want to thank everyone who is here in person, joining us on Zoom, maybe watching it later on YouTube, for continuing to support our bookstore, independent authors like these two lovely ladies, and just the book industry in general, because books are best. My shirt kind of gives that way. So I just want to remind everyone, we still have monthly book clubs happening that are meeting in person and on Zoom. So again, if you're not comfortable coming into the store for a book club, you can join us on Zoom. Next Thursday night is our last event of the year, and that is for Columbia River Forge and Mount Hood Moon Guide by Matt Wostradowski. So I highly recommend checking that out. He does an excellent presentation on hiking. So I'm really excited about this presentation and info tonight with Beefless Cakes. I've recently considered, what I'm eating and how it's impacting and all those things. But obviously it's really hard to think of changing maybe your entire way of life with a single book. So I'm really excited to hear from Robin Coarts and Jules Schnedeker. Say it for me, please. Schnedeker.
Thank you. I had it in
my
my head and then I lost it. So I'm going to turn it over to them. They also brought some goodies for us to try after this. Books are available for purchase and they will be signing them, as well as their mailing list, so that you can keep up on what is happening with your company. Again, Plant-Based Points. Plant-Based Point. Thank you. So please give them a little round of applause.
Thank you so much. Are you comfortable if we take our masks off so you can hear us a little bit better? Okay. Just let us know if that's a problem. But this way we can, I was joking, I'm from New Jersey, so I didn't realize I was loud until I moved to Oregon. But let me know if you have any trouble hearing us. So I'm Jules Schnedeker, and I went vegan overnight back in May 2016 after just innocently hitting play on a documentary on Netflix that I thought was just sort of about like healthy eating. Little did I know, so it's called Forks Over Knives. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's not a graphic film, I highly recommend it, but it did make the connection for me between what's on our plates and what's happening with the environment. And I was so moved that I even threw out the filet mignon in my freezer. I hesitate to tell people that, but I was just overnight for me. But it was really, really intimidating because I didn't know any vegans at all. So I kind of dove in head first and enrolled in a master's program, a master's for humane education, which I kind of joke is like the degree in veganism. And that is where I met Robin.
Yep. So yeah, I met Jules at our time, and prior to getting into the grad program, I had gone vegan about 7 years ago. I have 2 kids, and right after I had my first son, I was kind of rethinking health choices. I've been vegetarian for a really long time, and it just felt like it was the right move. I've been vegan ever since. My kids are vegan, my husband's vegan. We joke that I try to recruit people, just come on over, and doing it with food is always so much easier. But our program that we went to, the Humane Education Program, is a wonderful program, and the reason why it drew both of us to it is it touches on animal rights as well. A lot of humane education doesn't necessarily go into that as much as this one did, and so that's what really connected us to it as well.
And maybe just a little bit more about our background. So aside from the humane education bond, I have a creative writing background, and then I worked in corporate America for a long time before moving out to Bend, Oregon. So this has been a very happy home for a vegan. There's lots of amazing vegan options out there. And then Robin, you've got more degrees than she has time to talk about.
Yeah, and we won't go into all of that. In my other part of my life, my background is in thanatology, which is the study of death and dying, and I work closely with families when making end-of-life decisions, and I support them through the organ and tissue donation process for an organ procurement organization in Iowa, which is where I'm from, which is kind of interesting. I spend a lot of my time talking about death and dying and end of life, but my true passion is health and how to promote healthy living. So it's balanced.
And Robin has 2 kids, 3 and 7
Yeah.
boys.
Yep, 2 little boys. My oldest son, William, is like a vegan activist in training. Not that I'm like pushing him to do it, but he picks up on stuff pretty quickly. And just from what I talk about at home, he's already grabbing onto things. I think kids are just sort of naturally, not necessarily vegan, but naturally humane, they don't want to cause any harm just by nature. And so we can kind of foster that and nurture that. I think we'll be raising a whole other group. And then my little one, Holden, he just has a sweet tooth, and as long as it's baked good and it's vegan, he's perfectly fine.
And I just have one very high maintenance 11-year-old dog, which is sometimes plenty. So, and he's loving the Bend lifestyle here, getting to run all through these trails here. So he's thriving. But going back to what I was saying about not knowing any vegans, when Robin and I graduated, we both realized we had this passion to share education in this fun, kind of food-centered way, and to make it engaging, simple, affordable, and sort of targeted towards people who maybe are just kind of plant-based curious, you know, and we talk a lot about it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And so we thought, how can we make sure that someone who's interested in pursuing a plant-based path, whether it's completely or just a little, make that as easy and fun as possible. And so that's how Plant-Based Point was born. And we do all kinds of stuff. We do like taste tests and videos. We do library talks. We do cooking demos right in your house. And we're open to all kinds of things. And then we got this cookbook idea probably a year ago. And we decided to just like go all in with self-publishing. We took all the photos ourselves, and it highlights some local vegans talking about why they're plant-based, vegans from all over. But our main goal with it, a photo of every recipe, because who's with me? You open a cookbook and it's text. You've never made it before. You have no idea what it's supposed to look like. Maddening. So we were like, we don't care if it costs more to print it all in color. We are going to put a photo of every single recipe. We're not going to put any ingredient in there. I would say the craziest ingredient we have, which is always optional, is a miso paste, and that you don't have to use it. So that's about as crazy as it gets in there, but everything else is just standard produce that you would find anywhere, grains you probably had all the time, because we didn't want anybody to pick this up or come to our website and feel overwhelmed and intimidated. And we love talking about food.
That's true. And to sort of kind of build on that, a person who I follow, Rich Roll, if anybody's familiar with him, he has podcasts and books. He's just an awesome person. But something that really inspired me about his presentations, he obviously runs and he got into it. And I read his book, and he was talking about how after he started posting about it, he would get these messages from people like, what kind of watch are you wearing? What kind of shoes are you wearing? What, you know, everything. They wanted to know all of his gear. And he was like, just go outside and go running. Like, put on whatever shoes you have and hit the trail and see if you even like it. And so we try to apply the same mentality to this. You know, don't go to the grocery store and completely undo your pantry and replace it with all these things that you're not even quite sure you're going to like. Don't go out and buy this super expensive blender. Try some things before you go all in like that. So just like baby steps, like Jules was saying.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things we offer too, if you go to our website, which is plantbasedpoint.com, if you sign up for our mailing list, and we really only do like a monthly newsletter, we don't want to add any spam to your inbox, but we offer a plant-based primer that you get automatically if you sign up for the newsletter. So we thought we might talk a little bit about that, kind of what's in that primer and just some of those little basics that we love to share. And so when we were thinking about like, what's like our top tip if somebody's like, I'm thinking about going plant-based, and like Robin said, it's, you know, keeping it simple. You don't have to go all in and invest all of this money, but it's also, for me, if you're trying a new plant-based product, especially if it's like a vegan meat or cheese, you kind of think of it like that first time, if you were a Heinz ketchup person and you go over to Hunt's and you have that initial like, this tastes weird. It's kind of sometimes like that. It's like trying a new brand of something. You're just really accustomed to your Hellmann's mayonnaise instead of another brand. And so for me, that's been really helpful of like, just because I have that initial reaction of like, this doesn't taste quite right. It's more because I've just gotten so used to something else, like Kraft Ranch or whatever it might be. And so I've found, and Robin reminds me too, that your taste buds can take 7 times to get used to a new flavor, especially if you've eaten a lot of processed food and you're going into more whole foods. Keep giving it a shot, especially if you really feel motivated to add some plant-based products or some more fresh produce into your diet. If, you know, the first time you bring steamed broccoli back in and you hate it, just give it a couple more tries because it is amazing. how your taste buds do change. And I've come to prefer so many of the plant-based brands compared to what I used to eat. And we can talk about that a little later too, if anybody has any questions about our recommendations.
And then my tip is always just make it what you want it to be. So I kind of read cookbooks like I would read a book before I'll even commit to start making anything that's in it. And I'll read through it and I'll say, you know what, I really don't like that spice. Can I put something else in there? And then I'll add my Post-it and amend it. And then it works for me. So just because we have it set up the way we have it set up, everything's so editable. So however you want to make it fit for you, don't not make something because there's one ingredient you don't like. Just swap it out for something else and see what works. We have in the cookbook and then also on our website a lot of resources that will explain like what you can swap for other things. So like I made lasagna last week and the sauce was going to be pureed cashews with some other ingredients, and then I realized my kids have been eating the cashews all week and I didn't have as many as I thought, so I just swapped it for sunflower seeds and it worked. So little swaps like that can usually be okay. And then I just have to not put the cashews out.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. You'll see on the bottom of most of our recipes, there's a notes section. Because, and I know no one really wants to read the notes section of a recipe, but we try to keep it really simple just to explain what you can swap out and to not be shy about it, because a lot of these recipes are things we've adapted over the years and just made them our own. And so that's what we want other people to do. So go nuts, like no pun intended. But that also brings us to our next topic, because we were going to talk about plant-based pantry staples and like a few products that we really love. We just had a really cool opportunity to do a presentation for natural grocers about a plant-based pantry 101. So that's available. You can go to our website, plantbasedpoint.com, and you'll find that. And so we went through our 11 favorite plant-based pantry staples, which we won't go through all of them today, but one of them that we just write poetry about practically is nutritional yeast, which scares a lot of people. Kind of looks a little like,
Oh, my popcorn.
Everything, yeah.
do you know at Trader Joe's they sell it by the popcorn now? Like, word is out.
Yeah.
Someone was asking me where to find it and I couldn't, and then I realized they put it next to the popcorn. Yeah, it's kind of like this salty, funky, flaky kind of, they call it a Parmesan cheese substitute, but it doesn't taste like Parmesan cheese, but it adds a nice, like, complex, rich flavor, and it's good for you. And so we put that in a lot of stuff too, but again, that's another optional ingredient. So and it's not expensive, and you can find it pretty much at any grocery store here in Bend. And then cashews.
That's right. Yeah. And I think in our pantries, we both talk a lot about nuts, but a lot of recipes that are plant-based will use nuts. If you have issues with nuts, there's always things you can swap out for them. But I think cashews are probably the main event. They go into so many things, especially if you're making like a cheese style sauce. Cashews will be that main ingredient to give it that creaminess mixed with some nutritional yeast. Some of the other things in the pantry, we talk about like coconut oil, quinoa, your grains. So you want to make sure you're incorporating grains, dried beans. So just thinking about the things that's in your pantry right now that are already plant-based, just more of that. Those are the things that we end up swapping out.
And we sometimes when we're talking to people who are especially trepidatious, we kind of talk to them about what they're eating now and remind people that a lot of what you're already eating is accidentally vegan. So peanut butter and jelly and pasta and French fries and all those nuts and seeds. And we do, of course, get questions about allergies. And so a lot, like you were just saying, you swapped out the cashews for the sunflower seeds. And
I think that's allergen friendly.
yeah. And I was shocked when I went plant-based that you could soak raw cashews and then blend them into all kinds of creamy sauces. So you can really apply that to a lot of seeds too, soak really nicely, those raw seeds. And yeah, really, really good.
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt. I just want to ask a quick question. So with something like the sunflowers, if you don't have like the blender, would like a sunflower nut butter still work, or does it maybe have a weird consistency?
I think so like for my kids, we buy sunflower nut butter because they can't have peanut butter at school. And I think I don't think I would put that in as a replacement for like a sauce, because it does have it's not like peanuts, but it gives it that flavor. What I ended up doing was I literally swapped it for the same amount. And if you don't have a super high powered blender, soak your nuts or whatever it is in really hot water for longer than it calls for. And even one of the like less high powered blenders will get it there. Even boiling water. So if you have something that asks you to blend up dates, I feel like they're really challenging sometimes, even in a Vitamix to
Yes.
really blend up. So I'll soak them in boiling water for like 30 minutes, and then they get really, really soft. And so your blender will work with that.
I have made, so we have a peanut sauce recipe in the cookbook, and I actually one time didn't have peanut butter, so I used almond butter and made a peanut sauce with almond butter, which I thought would be strange, but it worked. So for those, there are some sauces that are good. I think some of those jarred ones might be a little grainy still, so maybe that'll impact like a cream sauce. But for something like a peanut sauce, yeah, right out of the jar and into your blender. You don't even need a blender for a peanut sauce. So depending on what it is, I think.
Do you break down the nutritional, like grams of protein, carbs, sugars, oils? Do you break that down?
We don't in this book, and the reason being because everything is plant-based or vegan, we're not adding any sort of extra ingredients into things. There are some dessert recipes in here which will call for sugar and things like that, but the bulk of the recipes are like plant-based.
I'm just curious about how you get your protein. You know, that to me, if you need 75 grams, you're an active, you know, person.
Nuts and beans.
So protein is probably our like, gosh, I don't even know if I call it our favorite / most commonly asked question. So most people in this country get twice as much protein as they need in a day. Protein has become just that buzzword. It's plugged into so many different things. You think like you can even look in like ice cream, and now it's like, you know, added protein. You're like, it's ice cream. I'm not eating this for protein, you know. But you can 100% get all of the protein you need on plant-based. To your point, beans, grains, quinoa is probably one of the best sources of protein. Brown rice, anything like that. It's sort of just rethinking your plate. So I think if everybody grew up in the same kind of house that I did, you know, it's that something brown, something green, and then maybe like a potato. Like that was kind of your plate. So it's just kind of rethinking it, taking the meat off and shifting things, maybe adding salad, adding more greens. It's just kind of just rethinking that idea. But yeah, I mean, you know, plant-based athletes all obviously, you know, get the amount of protein that they need. Speaking of documentaries, like Jules mentioned, Forks Over Knives, Game Changers is an awesome one. It's specifically about athletes and making sure they're hitting all of their needs. So
Yeah, that's a great one on Netflix. And a couple of the producers live here in Bend. So if you haven't seen Game Changers, it's doesn't go into animal rights or factory farming. It's all about plant-based athletes and nutrition. So it's just a great film. And I didn't know going plant-based that fruits and vegetables have protein.
Yep.
And so I think by pound, spinach has more protein than beef, if I'm remembering correctly.
yeah, so it's just that, like, just rethinking it. You know, we're kind of taught a certain way, you know, the pyramid or the My Plate or whatever the newest thing is on what we're supposed to be eating in the portions, but it's just rethinking that. Because you could definitely write out what you eat a day and realize like, wow, I'm probably getting more protein than I even really needed. I don't eat meat and I'm already hitting what I
you
need.
did that recently. Remember? You went through and you wrote down.
Yeah, I've
So
done
you
that. Yeah, we've done that for a few presentations. I just sort of kept track of my day, and you know, by probably like third snack or whatever you want to call it, I was like, yeah, I just kind of hit it for the day, and I wasn't eating any sort of like odd amount of anything, but just making sure you're the whole grains and the greens and your vegetables and everything, and you'll hit all of it.
And we love to talk about fiber too when we talk about protein, because generally as long as you're getting enough calories, you probably don't have to worry about protein. But fiber on a standard American diet with processed food is really hard to come by. So if you go more plant-based, you're naturally going to get a lot more fiber. And there's what's the percentage of people who are fiber deficient?
So it's like 95% of Americans are fiber deficient. So all of the nutrients are super important. You gotta make sure you're getting all of them. But we tend to not hear as much about fiber, and the only place you're gonna find fiber is plants. And it's super important for our system to make sure we're putting that in to get stuff out type of thing. Yeah.
So what, there is a book, and I'm gonna think of the title later, but the food pyramid and a lot of that stuff was actually influenced by lobbyists for the beef and pork councils.
Yeah.
So it has actually nothing to do with, it was about using it for schools to get them to put a certain amount in the schools' lunches and subsidize the beef and pork industries.
Yeah, there's so much out there about this. A recent book I read, it might be, it's called Salt, Sugar, Fat, if anybody's read that.
That might be the one I'm
It's
thinking of.
such a good / like infuriating.
Yeah.
Just call it that. Don't read it before you go to bed. Like, not that kind of book. It's super interesting, and it goes through the history of like why are certain things, you know,
Why
for
are we
me as a
addicted to
mom,
sugar?
I'm always asking, why are you offering dairy milk to my kids at school? Like, we don't need that. So just why, the why behind it. So it's really interesting to learn more about like the history of it all.
Yeah, the dairy is fascinating, how dairy wound up in schools.
Yeah.
Don't know. Look into it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a really, that's a very good book. Michael Moss, I think is the.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Yeah, and he just did another one. Literally just came out, I can't remember. It's not our book, so we're not gonna yeah, no. I think we were gonna talk about a couple of our favorite recipes from in the book, and then since we kind of have a nice group, we were gonna see if anybody, obviously more questions, but if you could share with us sort of like what attracted you to come in tonight, like what are you eating now, just kind of general discussion. Do you want to share some of your favorite?
I think, I have a few that I'm tied with in our cookbook. And it's probably tied to the vodka sauce and the scalloped potatoes, which is the secret weapon for both of those, coconut milk, which I love. I love that it can go savory or sweet. You can find it. My favorite one is at Market of Choice, and it's usually $2 for a can. And one can will go a long way. And so, yeah, the scalloped potato gives you that, just that rich creaminess, and you've got none of the cholesterol. And it's, yeah, those are, because I'm a sucker for creamy stuff. So if you had asked me 10 years ago if I could be vegan, I had been vegetarian for a while, I would have been the person who said, I can't give up dairy. But now, with all the recipes that I've learned about, and especially here in Bend with our grocery stores, the amount of really tasty dairy substitutes out there. If you haven't tried any in a while, like if you were turned off by them back, even just a year ago, give it another shot, because every time I go to the grocery stores here, especially Market of Choice, Newport Market, Whole Foods, Natural Grocers, there's at least a dozen new products. I try to do taste tests and post about them to share them on social media. So if you want me to be the taste tester for you, let me know. It's like my favorite thing to do, but now I can't keep up because there's so many new products coming out all the time. So it's a great problem to have, but there's some really amazing substitutes that even my non-vegan family members have now started buying because they just like them better. So it's exciting.
So my favorite recipes in the book, I have two. The first is I do a garlicky pasta, and it's like a one-pot dish. So I mentioned I've got kids. It's like a 30-minute meal. It's all in one pot, super easy to clean, and it's also one of those ones that you can adapt. So my sister's gluten-free, so I can easily swap out the noodles to make them gluten-free. You can add vegetables to it or steam something and then put it on the side. So it's like a really easy base dish, and you can add stuff to it. And then the other one is the chickpea salad, because that's, I think, just so easy. It's also a one bowl situation. You could stick it in, like my kids eat it for lunch a lot, and we'll just pair it with like crackers or put it on a sandwich, and you could even do like a melt if you find a vegan cheese that you want to put on it. But it's kind of, or you just eat it out of the Tupperware as you're making it. Sometimes what I end up doing, but it's just a really, really easy thing to
This
make.
doesn't fit in the Tupperware.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm like, there's too much. But yeah, I think all of what we talked about, they're just the easy recipes. They're just like quick and less mess and easy to clean up, no obscure ingredients, and crowd pleasers.
Yeah, the best part about, we joke about writing this cookbook is we finally wrote down our own recipes. I use this cookbook several times a week, even though it's like our recipes, because I'm like, how many cups of that was it? And so, yeah, it was really nice to just be able to have all of, because they're our go-to recipes. That's what they are. There's a couple that are like a little bit more complicated, a little bit more time consuming, nothing like lasagna, kind of a simple thing. It just takes some time to layer everything. So that's about as complicated as a recipe gets in this book. And sometimes we get questions about, whole food plant-based versus vegan versus, like we have peanut butter chocolate bars here today. And so our kind of feeling about that, and whether you're doing the processed vegan stuff or, the more whole food plant-based, like fruits and vegetable based recipes, we've got a lot of swaps in the book, like Robin said before, but we just like to have this open space where we don't say like this product is off limits, or, because you can really get in the weeds, because sometimes we'll talk about that, someone asked about wine and beer and things like that. And we always say, if you're new to plant-based, don't worry about some of those details unless you have like a specific health concern or allergy. Of course, we can talk about that. But just, go with the kinds of things you like that feel comfortable, because I feel like the minute you make something really hard and complicated, who wants to do that? I mean, nobody wants to add more complexity and time to their, kitchen routine. So yeah, we can definitely always talk about like nutrition specifics and where to get more of this or that. And Robin has a nutrition certificate, but we just want to make things, pretty simple. And so if you just love chocolate chip cookies, we can tell you the best vegan chocolate chip cookies to go buy if you don't want to make them. So
Yeah, there's definitely a balance. Yeah, I think sometimes you'll get that question like, well, is vegan healthy? Is plant-based better? And it's kind of the spectrum. So you can eat potato chips and one of the bars back here and popcorn and like all sorts of junky food, and it's vegan, and that's great. And that's a cool vegan option if you want to have something that isn't plant-based, but it's also not containing an animal product. So great, that checks that box. But to shift more to plant-based eating, that's where you're going to walk into the whole food plant-based, those ingredients that don't have a list of what's in them, they just are what they are. So your salads, your soups, lasagnas. The lasagna in the book does have what's in the sauce.
There's a tofu ricotta.
Yes, and yeah, so like all the ingredients, all the pieces to the puzzle can be plant-based, and then put it all together and you have your whole meal. But maybe you want to top it with like a vegan cheddar that's going to melt. So that vegan cheddar, maybe we wouldn't consider that whole foods plant-based. It's still vegan, it doesn't contain animal products, and the bulk of your meal is whole foods plant-based. So kind of giving yourself an allowance if you are gradually moving into eating more plant-based to have those little cheats.
Yeah, and it's a lot of what motivates you. Like, why do you want to eat plant-based? For me, it was environment and animals. So I'm like, I'm cool with the vegan junk food, what you might call junk food, because I know that it's not harming any animals, and so I'm okay with that. But I know for a lot of folks with different health concerns, they want to stay far away from, potato chips and the processed packaged food. And so, yeah, we just love meeting people where they are and giving them lots of options in the cookbook. So none of these recipes force you to really go one way or the other.
Love to hear from our crowd here, just how you're eating, what you're eating, how you like
Well,
it.
3 years ago, I had my blood drawn and my cholesterol was 293. And the doctor would have put me on statins, and I said, no, I won't go on a statin. And they said, well, you're kind of thin. I don't know what you're going to do. I have a family history of high. So overnight, I gave up all dairy and all meat but fish. And they, she said, how long do you want me to give you? I said, 4 months. In 3 months, my cholesterol went from 293 to 210, and I lost 14 pounds.
And you felt better?
Oh my God. I was already full of energy. I have twice the energy.
Yeah.
which is deadly.
Watch out.
And lost weight and feel much better, slept better. Went to oat milk. I used the vegan cheese. I do wonder about the plant-based meat substitutes because they are processed. And so I try to stay very limited on those. If I'm going to have an Impossible burger or an Impossible sausage, I just do it more infrequently. But where I can get a good bean burger, I'll substitute that for a processed plant.
Yep. Yeah. I'm very similar. I like Beyond Meat, but it's sort of that like once a month am I out where I want to like have a treat while I'm out and about. But yeah, I will usually shift more towards the like beef burger option.
Yeah. Well, I haven't eaten mammals in over 30 years, and I'm still here. You're a miracle. So, and can I tell you some of my favorite products that are out there now? I still, I love soy milk, and I use a 365 brand because it's not just organic soy milk, but it also is fortified with anything else milk would be fortified, like with calcium, vitamin D, that kind of stuff. But the miso paste you're talking about, you can't find that anywhere, mellow miso. And Yoko's cheese.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, so good.
Yoko's butter.
They are
Yoko's
really
butter,
good
I bake with.
Yeah, they're
Where do you
butter
find that?
that, actually.
Market
works
Choice,
with
Market
butter.
Choice, Newport, Whole Foods.
Yeah, it's delicious. And, the cheese is like BioLife, this great brand, new brand.
Their
The
cream cheese,
Daya-
BioLife cream cheese is so good.
Pardon?
The cream cheese, BioLife
Oh,
cream cheese,
BioLife,
it's
yeah,
so good.
BioLife's really good. Kite Hill, like Kite Hill, you know, you don't sacrifice anything. You discover a whole bunch of new stuff. And, I don't understand why being plant-based is more popular with all the stuff going on in the world personally, but that's just me. But you're not sacrificing anything, and you do get used to stuff. If I was to drink a regular glass of milk, I'd probably gag now. You know, so it's not a sacrifice at all.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up those different products, because actually I was just thinking, Yoko's butter I've seen at Target in their grocery section. So a lot of these brands now, and Walmart has a lot too. Trader Joe's has Yoko's.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And Oatly yogurt. Like
Mhm.
Oatly
Oh,
drinks
yeah.
oil, their plain yogurt is really good.
And it's great. It's kind of a great entryway too, because a lot of meat eaters have issues with dairy. So it's giving them a lot more options too. Because and if you have some of it's cashew based, but if you're nut allergy, they've got oat based. There's just so many different ones now. It really, it's really remarkable. We're at Market Choice now. I think the selection for plant-based, like meats and cheeses and that like carousel, is overtaking just the animal-based products.
Yeah, it was impressive. Lively Up Yourself is a vegan food cart in town, and I didn't know about the sunflower seed swap with the cashews until we ate it one day, and their macaroni and cheese, they switched the recipe. Was it for nut allergies? So vegans had requested who had nut allergies, and they swapped the cashews for sunflower seeds, and I couldn't even tell the difference really, which was weird. Yeah, they were both, just totally works.
Yeah, well, sometimes I don't think it's about like the flavor of the cashew, it's just the fact that it's like a fat. And so just making sure you can find something to swap that out. Like we were talking, sometimes we talk about oil a little bit, because if you are steering more towards the whole foods plant-based diet, people will stop using oil. So I don't cook or bake with any oil. And I always just use vegetable broth if I'm gonna saute something.
Yeah.
And then baking is applesauce. And so that's a way to keep a couple of those more highly processed things out of the meals that you're making. Just one less thing if you're not going to put that in there.
Yeah, so as you're a mom, and you get to add so many extra little healthy ingredients.
Oh, they don't
into-
even know what they're doing. I hide all sorts of stuff.
like the date paste or whatever contain, fill that sugar content enough sweet or whatever. It's so nice to feed your family healthy ingredients,
Well,
even-
something that was very important for me while my kids were really little and just learning foods was I just fed them like just the food, just the piece of broccoli or just the carrot, like no sauce on it, no salt, no butter, just learn this flavor. Because I think, and Jules kind of mentioned it, when we get older, we're used to, drizzling cheese all over our broccoli or dousing it in salt or whatever. So you genuinely lose what that's supposed to taste like. So if you have eaten, sort of the standard American diet for the bulk of your life, and then you're making this transition to plant-based, you're like, well, this is not even all that, well, I can't eat this, because you have just changed the way your body thinks about what this is supposed to taste like. So you kind of have to detox and relearn the fruits and vegetable flavors. So for my kids, it makes me feel really good when they actively reach for a bag of just baked carrots. Like perfect, anything extra on it, it just is what it is, and they eat that. So
I was a firefighter, and kind of was like, you eat in the firehouse, and it really was like almost every single meal. I mean, it wasn't a meal without meat. The breakfast on the weekends would be like meat and breakfast burrito with eggs and sausage and stuff, and you would be like, oh, you're at the store, and it's like, well, gosh, should we get 1 pound of sausage or 2 pounds of sausage? And it's like, well, you know, it'll be in the fridge, right? After we cook it up, it'll be in the fridge. Let's get 2 pounds, right? If there was a question about how much meat to get, it was always the greater amount. So when I retired, we moved here to Bend. My wife had been a vegetarian for a long time, and I like held her back from really her full whatever. And so I watched Cowspiracy, somewhat by chance. I don't know how we came to watch it, but I watched Cowspiracy, and the environmental piece was just so so overwhelming to me that it's like the one thing I can do. I don't have to stop driving my vehicle, which would be great, right? But I mean, that's difficult to do. That's hard, but changing your diet is relatively easy, and especially these days. I mean, we have 3 people in here that are 30 plus long, at least 3 that are 30 plus year vegans or plant-based, and that was hard then, you know. I look at them, yeah, pioneers, absolutely, and they've made it way easier for us. And so my blood work is way better. You know, energy-wise, I feel better. I mean, overall, it's all better. But everything's true. Anyone that hasn't done this, it took my wife cooking me wonderful savory things that she worked up, but so that made it easier. But I tell people 6 months, I felt like my palate had adjusted and changed. And then at the 1 year mark, I realized that it ultimately had. So it was like 6 months transition where it became really easy. And then at the 12-month point, it was like there was zero looking back. It's like straightforward. This is a no-brainer, and I feel great.
And you always say now food is more fun. Like
oh, yes.
He enjoys food more.
As much as I love eating at the firehouse with everybody, or, you know, having people, you know, having gatherings and cooking something up on the barbecue and all that, oh, you get all excited now. I love it even more now. Absolutely. Yep. It just feels better, tastes
I was just
better.
gonna say, do you know who the Ethelstein is? He was a firefighter.
And
Yeah.
you too?
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that guy did all that stuff, and I just, right while I was a firefighter doing it, I like wasn't ready to make that commitment. It was almost I couldn't do it. It was like, you know, it's a drug addict probably having drugs around them all the time, you know.
And could you imagine telling all the guys, look, can we do vegan?
Yeah.
You'd be,
Yeah.
holy cow.
Now we do
Exactly.
feed his firefighter friends vegan food when we can.
Yeah,
And they
when
like
they
it.
visit,
They enjoy
everything
it.
else, absolutely.
Can I tell you about another documentary that's just came out this week? And it's called They're Trying to Kill Us. And it's about food deserts in the US and the fast food restaurants in the inner city, and how there aren't the grocery stores, and just what a fight it is to get gardens in schools and things like that. It's called They're Trying to Kill Us, and pretty new. I guess you would just have to look it up to see how to watch it, but
Streaming services, you think?
I think you can get it online. I don't know what the charge is. I just heard about it.
Okay.
It just came out.
Awesome.
John Lewis, Badass Vegan. You can go to his website. It's probably on there.
Okay.
So there is a huge connection with food deserts and lower income and all of the polluting, factory farms. I mean, it's time. It's time to awaken the masses to how beautiful it can be. I've been vegan 21 years. My sweetheart is a vegan chef, and I'm very blessed that way.
Very.
And for educators, and he was a Culinary Institute of America graduate, so he had the chef thing down and then became vegan. And then there's another new movie out called Eating Our Way to Extinction, which is really a heavy hitting towards the environmental issues as well. And so we, the information is out there. We always welcome people to the table, get people to try something and welcome them and not scare them. And the fact that I can say vegan and croissant or vegan and beignet in the same sentence is, life is good. So.
Oh, by the way, if you have not had the vegan croissants here in town,
Yes.
Robin knows what I'm talking about. So I think they're the baker at Foxtail.
And they're at Palette every other day.
Oh, I could tell you the schedule if you'd like. Monday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. And I've been waiting for a proper vegan croissant, you know, that melts in your mouth and is all flaky and messy and you got to eat it that day. And this, apparently her son is vegan, so she developed some pastries to satisfy him. And so, yeah, you can get them at Palette. And yeah, so there's pretty much anything that I've been hoping would be veganized over these years. I'm like, I just have to wait a little while and it'll come about. Yeah. So talk about the opposite of a food desert. We're so lucky here in Bend. If you are moving towards plant-based or exploring it, you are in the right place.
But Eric Adams, new mayor of New York City,
Yeah.
and he has a great story about changing his diet because of his health.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
think he had diabetes, yeah, he researched all that for himself.
And on our website, we have resources like our favorite products, the plant-based pantry staples, our favorite books and documentaries. And what I'm hearing is we have a couple homework assignments. I love watching documentaries, so we're gonna check out these new ones. We can,
And there's another 15-minute one called 73 Cows.
Oh,
It's so sweet. It's about, I'm sorry.
okay.
It's about 73 cows.
Okay,
And
that's
you
not,
can get it, you
yeah.
can watch it for free on Vimeo.
Oh, great,
I
okay.
just watched it the other day.
That's excellent.
It's very
I want to mention a new cheese that I just found at Food for Less and at Newport. It's called Nuts for Cheese. And it's a kind of a soft cheese, so you can serve it. They've got smoked Gouda, they've got a black garlic cheese, and you can actually cut it and smooth it on your cracker, and it is delicious.
Yeah.
So,
And Boursin, that, you know, spreadable cheese.
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah.
now vegan. I think even at Trader Joe's has it. So it's all of those familiar brands now are coming out with plant-based versions. And if you haven't tried, one of my favorite things is Veganese, the Follow Your Heart. It's sold refrigerated, the mayonnaise, and it to me tastes like homemade, like restaurant quality mayonnaise. It is, my sister can't get enough of it. And they also make an amazing ranch dressing. You would never know the difference. And one of the barriers to entry for a lot of people is the cost, because some of these products we're mentioning are still a little pricey, but that's definitely getting better. And I can tell you firsthand that Whole Foods, surprisingly, for sales on plant-based products, and then if you're a Prime member, they do, it's like a $6 plant-based cheese might be down to $3 or $3.50. So it's then becomes a lot more comparable, because that's the frustrating part, I think, for both of us when we're recommending some of these swaps, is that, you know, we don't want to ask people who wants to spend 3 times as much money, especially if you're already hesitant about it, but it's getting a lot better. And then if you have a good go-to spot for produce and getting nuts and seeds in bulk, that can make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely need the bulk stuff that you can do. Like I do a lot of stuff through Thrive Market, and I thought that's pretty cost effective when you want to get like dried beans and grapes and things like that. Aldi's is also great if you get really lucky, you can hit their organic section and it hasn't already been destroyed by the previous customer. That's a great place for some good stuff. And
Where's
then
that?
Aldi's.
We don't have one here.
those
You don't
here.
have
I
one. Yeah,
think-
you just teased us, Robin.
Well,
Okay,
we
that's
do
all.
have
You
Winco.
keep talking about
And the
market choice. I
Winco
gotta market
bulk,
choice.
the Winco bulk section is really nice. The
Okay.
thing that I will, so I used to live in Portland and I lived out in Tigard and Lake Oswego, and we had a Winco right down the street, and I was juicing. Their produce is cheap because it's old. So the big thing with Winco is if you're going to get your produce there, be ready to eat it fast.
before you leave the store.
You've got a couple of days, but like your cucumber's not going to keep for a week. It's going to maybe keep for like 3 days. But their bulk dried section is really helpful. Like and again, if you make it like over the hill, Bob's Red Mill out in Milwaukee, outside of Portland, has a bunch of bulk there. Oh yeah, and they'll give you the containers and you reuse them. And I miss it.
Like culinary Disneyland.
Yes. Love Bob's Red Mill.
It's really fun.
I didn't even know that was there.
Yeah, and they'll tell you what's gluten-free, vegan. Like I love Bob's Red Mill.
That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, we're hoping they get more waste-free options for grocery shopping. I know market of choice, like you can fill the vinegar and olive oil and stuff like that, and even your spices, you can bring your own container. But they haven't quite made it easy yet at a lot of these stores. So but I think that's another shift that'll
COVID
come.
had a lot to do with that for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the single use and like individually wrapped things. Yeah. So
And one real quick caution is, just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's healthy. And I use labels now, like a man, woman, because there's so much sugar, like in yogurts, so much sugar and or canola oils, or so, you know. Something to look out for.
Yeah.
It's well organic.
There could be a lot of salt in anything packaged for sure, and just additives and preservatives that you're gonna find in any packaged food. Yeah, and I know palm oil can be a concern for environmental reasons, so a lot of products now will say like sustainably sourced palm oil, but if you have a passion for any of that, I mean, it's definitely a kind of do a little bit of research on what's going into your food, because unfortunately greenwashing and they're slapping all natural, they're calling things plant-based that have animal products in them.
Yeah.
So what I do, my little hack is, because eggs and milk are allergens, they have to put in bold under your ingredient label, is if I'm looking at a new product, I just quickly go down to that bolded text. And if I see milk or eggs, for me, it's out. And so I don't even have to read all the ingredients. So that makes it a lot faster. And I will reassure anybody who's shopping for the first time with like the plant-based goggles on, it's very overwhelming the first couple of times, but you really do retain what your favorite products are that are plant-based. So by like your third grocery shop, you already know, okay, bam, 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 bam. You don't have to check. I rarely check labels again, unless it's something I've never had before. Just to, and sometimes it's really obvious, it's just says vegan right on it, then you don't really have to check necessarily. But it's just that initial hump can be a little bit overwhelming, which is why, again, we encourage, if that's too overwhelming, you know, maybe this week it's the creamer for your coffee that you try, like an oat-based one. And then if you find you like that, maybe the following week you try the violet cream cheese, which is amazing. I just had that. And so, and just make it simple, because those little changes, even if you do like one a week, it adds up before you know it. And you can sleep well at night. So you're cholesterol free, because there's no cholesterol in plant-based products. You're supporting the environment and helping animals. Just with those little changes, it really does make a difference. So don't let, like they say, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. Just those little changes. And also then it helps you be an advocate. And anytime you go into a store or a restaurant and you ask for a plant-based option, that's one of my favorite forms of advocacy, because the more people who do that, once the demand is there, because the people with the money are kind of getting the people to make the changes, and you know, they want you to come spend your money at their establishment. So if they think that all of these people want plant-based options, that's what's going to kind of turn some of these ships around a little bit. So even just doing that, that's a pretty simple win.
Well, it can be super exciting / heartbreaking when you go to get the cream cheese and it's all out. You're like, that means people are buying it.
Yeah.
But, oh, I really wanted it. So
That just happened with my nuts and cheese. And I had to go over to Food for Less because they had it.
but you're like excited, because you're
Yeah.
like, oh great,
Yeah.
people are buying it, but now I gotta go somewhere else.
There was, so we had the toilet paper shortage during COVID. There was also then a tofu shortage. I don't know if
Yeah.
anyone remembers this.
Yeah.
And I was torn also, because I was like, well, yes, I'm glad people are eating tofu.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk real quick about the soy, because that's a big question that comes up. So again, if you watch Game Changers, they say it so much more eloquently than I could. But long story short, like if you're eating all natural, unprocessed soy, like edamame, organic tofu, the soy milk that's just like organic soybeans and filtered water, that has phytoestrogens. So it does not, it's not an issue. And it's the processed soy that you get in all kinds of packaged frozen food. Even meat-based frozen food has all that added stuff. And again, everything in moderation. So unless if you're eating strictly like Stouffer's frozen food all the time, you know, that's probably you're gonna have some sodium issues. You're gonna have a lot of things. But in general, like the soy concern is a little bit, it's hyped up. It's
Do you
really,
mean about breast issues and stuff?
yeah, and right, and I get that a lot from a lot of my male friends.
If you
still.
go back to the folks who sort of put the advertisements out making soy sound really bad, it was actually dairy industry funded. You know, and that you can find online, like it wasn't threat to the dairy industry, because soy milk got really popular. People really liked it as an alternative. So, you know, some things get a bad rep and it's not necessarily.
So it was interesting. My mom had come to me and said she had been seeing a nutritionist, and then suddenly was waking up every night the worst heartburn she'd ever had, and she like couldn't go back to sleep because she couldn't lay down. And we kind of talked about it. I was working with someone on a cookbook in Portland at the time, and we narrowed it down. It was soy protein powder that she was putting in with frozen fruit every morning to make like a little smoothie, because so we have heart disease, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. My aunt is thin like you, has had high cholesterol forever.
Yeah.
My mom and I are heavier, and my cholesterol is really bad right now. And so we kind of, and she finally, and it turns out, I think she'd actually bought it from the nutritionist. And I was like, there's your first problem too, because she's somehow making money on the back end, which whatever. But as soon as she stopped using it, went away. And like, I know some people like the Orgain protein powder that you can get at Costco, and I've used it before and not had issues, but she felt like she was dying, and it was processed.
Yeah.
She'll eat edamame and she's fine, but she can't have that powder. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Should we pass out desserts?
Here, okay, yeah, we have napkins too. Maybe I'll just put them right in there.
Yeah.
And then you can actually.
So what's the strangest feedback you've gotten and what's the best feedback you've gotten?
That's a good question. Oh, no, that's an interesting thing. I've seen that. And I love all of it. But I love it when people like to just sort of confess to us what they eat. Right? And I'm always like, okay, that's great. If that's what works for you. It always just kind of makes me chuckle because I'm like, okay,
Well, sure.
I'm not gonna get you in trouble. So I think that's always sort of takes me back. It makes me laugh. And I think like my dad is a big meat and potatoes guy. And so he has made a couple of the recipes in the cookbook, which is a win. He likes the General Tso's sauce because that's that's pretty easy to kind of accidentally vegan. So that's my favorite feedback, when it's someone who swears they won't go anywhere near anything vegan, even like accidentally vegan.
Yeah, don't you love when they comment online and say, you take that and you cook it in coconut oil because you can throw it out of the pan quick enough? And I'm like, really? All the meat and potato people making fun. I get mad.
They're gonna eat triple the amount. They'll say they'll eat triple the
Yeah.
amount of meat.
So Jules, how
Yeah,
do you buy a cookbook? You just.
You can buy it here from Roundabout Books. Yeah, that'd be amazing. So they can help you out. We've got a bunch right here, and yeah, just it's through them.
Yeah.
Have
so
you
do
guys
we-
signed it?
Yeah, so they're gonna sign them, so we'll
Okay.
bring you up here at this register. And again, we'll have the recording on YouTube, so anyone who couldn't make it, please share it with them. But yeah, like,
Yeah,
do a
thank you so
quick-
much.
Yeah, thank you.